Okay, let's go ahead and get started now. So for those of you who just joined, thank you very much for joining us today for this webinar about the Connecticut Energy Storage Solutions Program. So our agenda today, so first we're going to do an overview of Enphase Grid Services. Enphase offers grid services through numerous utilities around the country. So while you're, of course, are attending a webinar for a specific grid services program, we want to let you know that we do actually offer it in many different places in the country, and those programs are just popping up more and more frequently as utilities and homeowners realize the benefits of such programs. And we're going to do a specific overview of the program we're discussing today, and we're going to talk about the installer grid intake portal as well. And then we'll segue into a Q&A where we'll answer all of your questions, and then we'll let you know what we would recommend the next steps are for you to take. Let's do some quick introductions here. My name is Tony Bernetti. I'm a sales trainer at Enphase Energy. I'm just sort of facilitating the webinar today and making sure that everything goes smoothly. Steve Lasher is the head of business development for grid services with Enphase Energy. He'll be speaking for a portion of the webinar as well. And our special guest is Ed Kranich. He is the Senior Manager of Incentive Programs with Connecticut Green Bank. He is the man that knows all the details about this program and will be presenting most of the information today. We also have online Sarah Sawanjandar, Head of Marketing for Grid Services with Enphase Energy. And joining us a little bit later is Bashik, Head of Program Management for Grid Services. He is our technical expert in making sure that the program from a technical standpoint, software standpoint, works correctly. So first, let's start with what Enphase is offering in terms of grid services. So Enphase offers systems that are essentially ready out of the box from a hardware and software perspective for grid services programs. We do actually customize the software based on the specific needs of these different grid services programs. And we're eager to be part of these programs because they do offer so much value to homeowners and the utility grid and can really help reduce the cost of a battery system, which is important in some markets where perhaps backup power is the priority. Our systems offer multiple battery modes as well. So in batteries for backup power if they experience frequent power outages. In some markets, they also have, there's a big financial benefit to using your battery to offset peak utility rates, for example, in California, where the peak rates are extremely high. So basically, the customers very easily can change the battery mode within the Enphase app to be whatever the optimal mode is for them, whether it's a savings mode or self-consumption mode or backup preparation mode. We strive to offer a best-in-class homeowner experience with our system. The Enphase app is able to kind of monitor and control every component of the Enphase system because all components are from Enphase. Other solutions on the market sometimes cobble together solar inverters and battery inverter systems from different companies and make them work together with software. With Enphase, we are offering a comprehensive approach here where all components and software are provided by and designed by Enphase Energy for a superior customer experience. With Enphase Energy and grid services, customers have 24/7 customer support, which is very rare in the battery industry. Enphase, when we started offering batteries a few years ago, we realized that we're not just a technology provider anymore. We're actually now a utility provider, or in a sense, a utility for customers when their main utility fails. So we felt like we really need to up our game in terms of offering better customer support. And we now offer 15-year warranties on our Enphase batteries as well. We also strive to provide excellent installer support. Installers can use Enlighten Manager, or also called the Installer app, to easily access and monitor battery performance of their customer systems during grid outage events or during grid services events. You can also access certification programs for free through Enphase University, a great way to get trained up and get certified to install our systems if you're new to Enphase. And we also, of course, have a battery bonus program webpage where we have information about all the different grid services programs that we offer. And I'll share links with that program to that webpage with you toward the end of the session today. So with that, let's move on to an overview of the program. So Steve or Ed, go ahead.
Yep, I'll get started. Thank you so much. I'll give a quick overview, and then Ed will actually provide a little more detail of the program. So in terms of the purpose of this is, reducing strain on the electric grid during high demand hours. The utilities and Connecticut Green Bank will compensate all the participants for discharging their Enphase batteries during two types of events. There's passive events and active events. We'll get into that in the next slide in more detail. This is the eligibility here is for all new residential battery storage systems, as long as it was installed after January 1st, 2022. So anything installed last year and going forward this year, it doesn't have to be paired with solar in order to be eligible. And how it works is that aggregators like Enphase remotely discharge the customer's batteries during passive and active events. In the case of passive events, they're really just scheduled. They're scheduled every day in the summer or for 3 months in the summer. Active events are called by a utility. So when it comes to utility making a call, they're going to forecast when they need to have some load reduction to reduce the grid peak capacity, and they will communicate that to us, and then we will make sure that active event happens. And in the case of, I'll get into this in more detail, but in some cases, active events may supersede passive events. We'll show you more next slide. In order to, to compensate customers for this participation, you get two types of incentives. The upfront incentive, which comes from the Connecticut Green Bank, is $200 per kilowatt hour of usable battery capacity. And that's for participating in all the passive events. And that $200 per kilowatt hour is what's available today. There will be a step down over time for at least some of the classes of customers. And there are higher incentives for other classes of customers, like low-income customers, underserved communities, and there's an adder for grid edge as well. So we'll talk about that, and Ed will get into those details. Now, in addition to that upfront incentive, there's also a performance incentive, and this is for customers participating in the active events. This is much more voluntary. Customers can kind of opt out if they needed to, but they would lose out on some additional incentive of $225 per kilowatt each year. There's a summer period and a winter period, each offering slightly different amounts and requirements in terms of how many events they would be called. But overall, over the course of the year, you could be eligible for $225 per kilowatt year contributed to each active event. And then that actually steps down as well after the first 5 years. So you'll see $225 for the first 5 years, and then for the last 5 years of commitment, it goes down a bit. We go to the next slide. So here's a little more of the details of that incentive. So as I mentioned, there's the $200 a kilowatt hour, sort of the standard incentive. That would equate to about $2,000 upfront for an IQ Battery 10. Now, as you know, obviously we have an IQ Battery 5P. That's our new product. So you could imagine about two of those being around 10 kilowatt hours. So you get about the same $2,000 for the IQ Battery 5P. And then of course you get, a little bit less for an IQ Battery 3 and so on. There is a cap, $7,500 per project, or 50% of the battery installed cost. And then there is actually some additional incentive for underserved communities and for lower income households. And those are quite lucrative, between $300 and $400 a kilowatt hour of battery capacity. And then on top of that, there's a grid edge adder, which is applicable to some customers in areas where there's the greatest need. And Ed can go into that in a little more detail, but that would increase all these incentives by an additional 50%. So you're looking at a pretty potentially a very lucrative opportunity for customers. And as I mentioned, there are steps. So we want to get customers or installers, we want to get customers signed up. as soon as possible to take advantage of the $200 standard, $200 per kilowatt hour standard incentive, but that will go down over time as more and more customers enroll and that funding is used up. So you'll see after the first block is estimated to be about 2,000 customers, then it goes down to 170 and so on. The underserved and low income incentives are not going down over time, so those will be available throughout the whole period. Now, in addition, I mentioned the performance incentive. What that translates into for an IQ Battery 10 would be about $363 additional each year, excuse me, which can add up quite a bit over time. It does go down from 225 and it goes down to 130 for year 6 through 10. So if you look at the 10-year incentive overall for an IQ Battery 10, it would be around $3,000, and that's up to $3,000 because certainly customers may not deliver the full 80% of their battery capacity during the event. In fact, the 363 annually assumes a much lower amount of battery capacity delivered because currently the way the program is structured with our DERMS partner Energy Hub, that the amount of discharge is only around 1.61 kilowatts during the 3-hour events, and that's because they can only discharge a fixed amount for both passive and active events. In the future, and we're hoping by the end of this year, we'll work with Energy Hub, our partner, to increase this kilowatts delivered during the active events to something like 2.6 kilowatts. That would be the maximum that would be possible over a 3-hour period, which is higher than a 5-hour period. And that would increase the incentive substantially by about 50% to over $600 per year. So that almost $3,000 per year that you can see there at the bottom for an IQ Battery 10, we're hoping by the end of this year that that's going to go up quite a bit, assuming that the integration with Energy Hub goes smoothly. So more to come on that. When we make changes, we will update our website and try to communicate the additional savings possible as that becomes available. We'll go to the next slide. And what is required in order to get those incentives? Excuse me, for the passive events, customers are committing to discharging 80% of their battery capacity for 10 years. So that means at the end of every passive event, the customer would still have 20% of their battery capacity that they could use in case of an outage. And certainly by the next day, those batteries would be charged back up, assuming that this is paired with solar. Event duration and frequency is 5 hours for the passive events. It's going to happen between 3 and 8 p.m. every day. I think this is around 60 to 70 events per year. Just looking at the fact that it's only weekdays and excludes, I didn't exclude holidays there, but every year is going to be a little different. But if you just look at weekdays excluding holidays for 3 months, somewhere around the 60 to 70 events per year. So you're looking at June, July, and August is when these passive events will happen. 5 hours every day during the weekday. For the performance incentive, again, these are the active events. This is more of an optional, if you will. When there's an active event called, the customer can decide to opt out, but if they decide to stay in, they would be discharged, as I said, that 1.61 for an IQ Battery 10. But hopefully we'll be able to move that to a higher incentive amount or a higher discharge amount because the incentive level would increase for customers. And these are going to be maybe even less than 3 hours. So the utilities are saying we need somewhere between 1 and 3 hours from 12 to 9 p.m. There's probably going to be 30 to 60 of these events in the summer and 1 to 5 events in the winter. And you can see there the summer and winter periods. It's actually a little bit more than just the summer and winter, creeps into the fall and spring, but you can see June to September for the summer period and November to March for the winter period. And as I mentioned previously, those active events, which are called by the utility when they need demand reduction, that is going to happen. There could be a time where it happens in the summer months, and in which case those passive events that were scheduled would be superseded. So the active events would supersede the passive events. Passive events would essentially be canceled if there's any overlap. We go to the next slide. Last slide I'm going to cover is the program requirements. Some of this is really important information, some nuances to the program that are really important for you to know and for you to pass on to your customers. So first of all, the customers must enroll in the Connecticut Energy Storage Solutions program through the Green Bank. You'll get some more about that from Ed. But once all that is taken care of, then you would submit an application at our grid intake portal or our installer grid intake portal. And my colleague Kaushik, if he's able to join, will kind of walk us through what that looks like after Ed speaks. And what that allows us to do is to kind of validate and submit the application to the utility for approval. So after we've done our validation, then you can send to the utility will kind of check on things and make sure everything is good, then they will get approved and the customer will be enrolled. So we have to remember that important step after Connecticut Green Bank provides their approval and enrollment, then you have to go through the grid intake portal at Enphase to complete the application and get fully enrolled. So a couple things you want to communicate to customers. Really important to note that the battery reserve state of charge level will be set to 20% for all events. So we're going to set that and lock it for all events. When there's not an event, the reserve SOC that the customer wants to set will be honored. It will be whatever it is that they had set it for. But for the grid services event, it will essentially be overridden and go to 20%. The other thing that will override during grid services events is storm guard. So I noted here that the active events will not be called before or during major storms. It's actually the active and passive events will not be called. So those passive events, if there's a major storm coming, would be canceled by the utility. So sorry, I have to update this slide to indicate that, and Ed can go into more detail about how that works. So we won't have storm guard activated during events, but the utilities are not going to be calling these events when there are major storms coming. And we're doing these settings, we're enabling these settings to meet the program requirements and also to maximize participants' performance incentives. The final point I want to make, which is really important, we've had a lot of issues on some of the beta installs and enrollments to date, is that in Eversource, customers have the ability to enroll in connected solutions as well as this program, and that is not possible. The utilities will not enroll a customer in the energy storage solutions program if they are a connected solutions customer. So we have to make sure, and we could use your help to make sure those customers know not to go onto the Enphase homeowner app and enroll themselves in connected solutions, which they can do through their app. We need to make sure they know not to do that, because if they do, it's going to delay things, and it's quite an onerous process to unenroll them from connected solutions. And then you'd have to re-enroll them, go through our Enphase app again, or sorry, go through our Enphase grid intake portal again to enroll them in the energy storage solutions program. So it is a hassle. It will significantly delay enrollments. And right now we don't have an automated way to prevent this. We're working on that solution. But for the moment, we're going to have to rely on you all to communicate that very clearly to customers, that they cannot and should not enroll in connected solutions. Otherwise, they won't be eligible for this program. Next slide. I think we're on to, great. Now we'll hand it over to Ed. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Steve. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I hear you well.
Yes, Ed, we can hear you.
All right. Great. So a lot of the details Steve has already gone over for the program. I just wanted to make a couple of kind of clarifying comments here. Just it's kind of more in the nitty gritty details, but so on the averages for the performance incentive, we pay based on the average kilowatts of power delivered over the whole season, and there's 2 seasons a year. The summer season is $200 per kilowatt average, and the winter is $25. That's for the first 5 years, and then that ratchets down to $115 for the next 5 years for the summer, and then $15 for the next 5 winters. So that $225 is actually the total for both seasons for the year. We expect to do anywhere from 30 to 60 events per summer, and maybe 1 to 5 per winter. Those, of course, are subject to change as the forecasted peaks may change over the years. So, we got a lot of push for electrification in Connecticut. So we may end up seeing a winter peak. So we'll see. So overall, Energy Storage Solutions, it's a program managed by the Connecticut Green Bank and Eversource and UI, the two major utilities in Connecticut. So it serves most of the state. And it's overseen by the Public Utilities Regulatory Authority, PURA. So we have regulators to answer to on an annual basis. The program has to pass certain cost tests in order to, be viable. So we have a statewide goal in Connecticut of reaching 1,000 megawatts of storage. 580 megawatts is devoted to energy storage solutions. That is a 10-year goal from 2021. So we're looking at 2031 to reach this goal. It's pretty lofty. It does include some front of the meter, which is kind of TBD in development now. So any developers out there that also work in the front of the meter space, if you have questions about that, you can reach out to me and I can refer you to the group for that. But this program is specifically behind the meter storage. So we're currently in, for residential, we're in that first 3-year tranche right now, which is on the screen. It's that 50 megawatt tranche for 2022 to 2024. We've actually only reached about 1.5 megawatts for the first 3 years of residential so far. So, we are definitely behind what our expectations were for residential. Kind of the startup of kind of building this program in Connecticut, getting contractors interested, getting customers to understand the incentives and financing and things like that have been a little bit of barriers. So, we're definitely looking for suggestions on, is there anything, do you get any feedback from your customers on how this program works, or, anything that makes it easier or harder for them to understand the program, so we're always open to making changes. And forgive me, there's a car alarm going off outside of me, or outside the window here, so if you can hear that. So we do have a commercial section for this program as well. It's all the capacity is split up 50-50. So that part of the program is kind of on the way other end of the spectrum. We're way ahead of schedule. We're into the next 3-year tranche of 100 megawatts. So again, any installers out there who work in both Resi and C&I, you're welcome to sign up to do both, to join the program to offer to both types of customers. So next slide, please. So we have already gone in a little bit of detail, thanks to Steve, on kind of the specifics of the incentives in this program, but just a little bit of extra detail here on kind of how to qualify customers. So with residential, which is mainly what we're talking about here, we have the 3 customer classes of standard, underserved, and low income, and the respective upfront incentives for those customers are $200, $300, and $400 per kilowatt per kilowatt hour of capacity for the upfront incentive. And those can all be boosted by 50% if they are grid edge customers who experience greater or more frequent power outages than the average. So we have maps on our website where you can type in a customer's address and you can find out if they reside in a grid edge area. You can find out if they are an underserved community, which is just someone that's on a list of about 27 to 35 or so towns in Connecticut that are considered economically distressed. So, we have some tools on there, kind of easy ways to sort of quickly qualify someone. Low income can be a little bit trickier, but chances are if they've participated in certain energy assistance programs or certain state programs, then there's a good chance that they would qualify as low income for this program. So, the criteria are pretty wide. So for passive dispatch, we expect customers, who qualify for the upfront incentive to get the passive dispatch incentive. We expect them to participate in these all non-holiday weekday events, about 60 or so per year during the summer. So we're in the season right now, June, July, and August. Those are 5-hour uniform dispatch windows of about 80% of the battery's capacity. Any time that we call an active event, which is, for that performance incentive, anytime that we call an active event, it's going to overlap with these passive events. So we're going to cancel the passive event for the day. So we expect probably in late July, August, and a little bit into September, when we get those really hot peak days, to be canceling a lot of passive events and instead doing active. So instead of doing a 5-hour 80% discharge, we'll do a 3-hour up to 100% discharge. And as Steve said, it sounds like Enphase specifically, there's kind of a software development in place that will allow the batteries to participate at a greater rate. So keep an eye out for that. So the active dispatch windows can be really any time, any day. So it doesn't matter if it's a weekend or a holiday. And that will typically occur probably from 6 to 9 p.m., we're assuming. But that it'll depend based on the forecast for the day. So next slide, please. So here's a visual example. I think this is a little more helpful for how passive dispatch works. So we're talking non-holiday weekdays. So you've got all these passive events scheduled. We've got the month of July here. So we'll say in this case that July 4th is on a Wednesday. And in that case, there would be no passive dispatch for that day. Again, these are pre-programmed. This is 80% of the battery's capacity to discharge during this time from 3 to 8 p.m. So if we go to the next one, we'll show what happens when there are active events. So the plan would be that the previous day, so say there's an active event expected to occur on Tuesday the 3rd, the customer would be notified ahead of time on Monday the 2nd, and they would be notified that your passive dispatch for tomorrow is going to be canceled. Instead, we're going to do an active dispatch at this time, at which point the customer could opt out if they want to. It's up to them, but again, they would get a 0 for that event that would average in, and then they would end up getting a smaller incentive for the season. So showing here how we would call those active events, we would cancel the passive events. So if we go next, we'll show what happens when you have a storm. So in this case, Friday the 6th, if there's a storm forecasted, that would trigger the utilities preparedness protocol. So if there's some kind of a more major weather event where there's a certain level of outages that are possible from this storm. So we're not talking about like these kind of small localized things. This is something that affects more of a statewide range. Then we would cancel any events planned for that day to allow the battery to remain charged in case of an outage. So reliability and resilience is definitely high on our priorities here. That's really number one. We want to use these batteries to offset peak demand, but mainly people, especially residential customers, get batteries because they want backup in the case of an outage. So we want to make sure that they always have that. So next slide.
Ed, do you see the next slide that says year 2 residential incentive levels?
I do now. It just changed.
Okay. Little delay there.
Yeah. So these are, this is the expectation for the next residential levels. I think this section probably isn't really that relevant because we're quite a ways away from even reaching the first 10 megawatts of capacity. But just so you know, we do have the expectation that the standard customer incentive rate will go down over time. Whereas with underserved and low income, we'll probably wait a little bit longer. We're not planning on bringing those down for the following years. But right now, we're still in that first 3-year capacity block, and we're still not close to 10 megawatts yet. So this is more of an FYI, but we do plan to bring down the upfront incentive over time when it makes sense. Next slide. And finally, for more information, please visit energystoragect.com. If you're not already an eligible contractor in the program, you can find links on that website to join. And if you have any questions, you can always reach out to us. But in general, the process is fairly straightforward to join as an eligible contractor. We really just need insurance, licensing, things like that. And we'll give you the training you need to use our software to get customers enrolled. We offer co-branding, so you can brand yourself as an Energy Storage Solutions eligible contractor with our logos and things like that. So we offer a lot to try to give contractors what they need to be successful. Next slide. And customer journey, is that, I'm not sure if this is mine or if this is for Enphase.
Yeah, Kaushik's going to go through this one. Kaushik, I think you're on.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ed.
Hi, everyone. So this slide talks about the customer journey on how we can enroll the certain site into the program. So initially, as Ed mentioned, so we need to, so the installer has to be recognized installer by the Connecticut. So if we go through step by step here, so the first step is when the customer connects with the installer and shows interest about the program. So installer needs to ensure that they are approved by the Connecticut Green Bank. So they need to go to their portal, as Ed was mentioning, try to enroll the customer there. So they get a phase 1 approval where they can go ahead and install the site. So as stated in step 2 here, so installer submits the application to Connecticut Green Bank on behalf of the customer. So gets a approval from them, complete the site commissioning, so gets a PTO from the utility and complete the complete site commissioning. And once everything is done, they'll receive a reservation of funds document from Connecticut Green Bank. So that's when installer needs to visit our Enphase grid intake portal. So step 3 here. So installer needs to submit an application to Enphase. So there are 2 documents here. So as mentioned here, there is a grid intake portal, which is located at gridintake.enphaseenergy.com. So all the Enphase T&C document is available there. So installer needs to get the document signed by the customer. So once you have the signed customer T&C document, the site received PTO, site received reservation of funds document, they need to visit the portal and submit an application on behalf of customer. So that's when Enphase receives the application. So we validate those forms, what are the customer details, whether they are matching with the enlightened details and all. So once Enphase validate the forms, so we approve the application from our end, and we automatically share the application with the utility. So utility now has the application. Right? They review the application and they approve it from their end. So once their approval is complete, so that's when Enphase finally enrolls the site into the program. So in any case of rejection either by Enphase or from the utility, the installer will be able to resubmit the application in the grid intake portal. So once I'll give a brief demo about the intake portal also, but once the application is approved and the site is enrolled, that's when the site can participate in the events. There are 2 different kind of events, as it has mentioned, so the passive events and active events. So the passive events schedule is already defined here. So Enphase will automatically schedule these passive events, and active events are generally scheduled based on the email communication to Enphase. The utility communicates to Enphase when they want to create an active event, and upon active event creation on a certain day. So for example, if there is an active event scheduled for 22nd June, So Enphase will automatically cancel the scheduled passive event on that day and schedule the active event. So the sites will now discharge as per the active event timings here. So the customer will have an opt-out option for the active events as well, as these are linked to the performance incentive. So once active event is scheduled, customer will have an option to opt out of the events also. And if there is a storm alert being active in that region, Enphase will automatically respect the storm guard and not discharge the batteries, even though if there are any events scheduled. Any questions on the floor, or can I go ahead with the demo of the portal?
We can, let's go ahead with the demo, Kaushik, and then we'll do a Q&A right afterward. So I will change you to be the presenter so you can control it, okay?
Yeah, thanks, Tony.
All right, you should be able to share your screen now.
Yeah, I just need to rejoin in the webinar. Just give me a minute. I'll rejoin.
Okay. While we're waiting for Kaushik, why don't we just address a couple of questions that came in? Ed, sorry. Yeah, Ed, these are probably best for you. You may have covered these, but sometimes some details are missed. So the first question is, how does the customer get paid and when? Oh, you're on mute, Ed.
Muted. Excellent question. So the customer for the upfront incentive actually doesn't get paid. So the installer does. We pay the upfront incentive to the eligible contractor after the project has been put online and is able to communicate with the DERMS platform and has passed inspections. So the contractor offers the upfront incentive as an upfront cost reduction. So $20,000 system, $2,000 incentive. The customer will pay you $18,000, and the green bank will pay you the $2,000 at the end when the project's finished. And then for the performance incentive, that's issued as a check 6 to 8 weeks after the end of each season. So after the summer season ends in September and after the winter season ends in March, the customer would get a check from their utility, whether it's Eversource or UI.
Right, thanks for clarifying that.
Yep.
Another question from Michael is, can you choose to do more discharges of the battery? I assume they're asking, for the performance-based incentives. Mm-hmm. If you do more, can you get more money? How does that work?
Nope, only as directed by the utilities.
Yeah, Tony, I just joined. Can you?
All right, great. So those are the only 2 questions that we had right now. So Kaushik, if you'd like to share your screen, that would be great.
Yeah, can you change the presenter to me?
I don't see your screen yet. Oh, change the presenter to you. Okay, let's do that again. Okay, you should be able to take control now. Okay, we can see it now, Kaushik.
Awesome. Okay, so this is the grid intake portal login. So grid-intake.enphaseenergy.com is the web link. So once you log in, you can see it like this. So you can use the existing Enlighten credentials to log in into this portal. And once you log in, you will be seeing the dashboard where the existing programs are there. And Energy Storage Solutions program, you can click on that widget, so that will land you here initially. So if you see here, there is a download link to download the program documents. The Enphase terms and conditions document is captured here. So once you click on the download, you can download the Enphase terms and conditions from here. So we want that document to be signed from the homeowner. And we also have a widget where you can see the existing complete flow of the program. So we have a step-by-step guidance here on how you can, what are the steps you need to follow. So download Enphase TNC document, get it signed from the homeowner and upload it in the city green bank portal. And then once the site is commissioned, you'll get the PTO document from the utility. And once the site commissioning is complete, once you get the PTO document and the reservation of funds document, so that's when you need to submit an application here. So you need to fill the homeowner details, upload the documents, and submit the application for Enphase review. So Enphase reviews the application and then shares it with the utility. And once that utility review is complete, we'll enroll the site into the program. So the application can be submitted from here. So the portal is pretty simple, where you have just one application tracker dashboard and then the options here. Upon click on submit new application, so we can see, so the utility selection is the first thing that needs to be done. So there are two utilities which are running this program, so Eversource and United Illuminating. So this selection is very important because we share the application based on the selection here. So if, for example, the user falls under the Eversource utility, so you just need to select the Eversource and provide all the details here. So you need to provide the site ID and then customer name, all the details. So the address, line 1, city, state, zip, and all. And the primary email address and phone number is for contact purpose. So we also need to know the battery details. So based on the battery details selected here, so Enphase will review whether the site has the respective battery details or not. And based on the battery details, the committed power is auto-populated. So the way how we do the committed power for this program is for the passive events. The events has to happen over 5 hours, where 80% of the batteries needs to discharge. So that gives around 16% of the power. So that 80% of the discharge can be met over 5 hours. And then we also need the electric account number and the PTO date. And the final input here is the incentive category. So based on the incentive category of the user, this needs to be selected. So Enphase will automatically populate where the incentive amount, so the respective incentive amount applicable for the homeowner. So that will be derived based on this selection. And you need to confirm here. And also these two documents needs to be submitted. So one is a scanned copy of TNC document and the reservation funds document. And once all these details are filled, you just need to submit this application. So once application is submitted, you can view the application here in the tracker with the respective details and the status here. So as you see, the statuses are mentioned here as well. So one is submitted for Enphase review, and then it says either approved or rejected by Enphase, and then submitted for utility review, and then approved or rejected by the utility. So all the steps here are automated. So upon the application submission, it will directly come to Enphase, so where we do a manual validation of the site. So this generally takes 1 to 2 business days. And once that is done, we automatically share the application with the utilities. And whenever the utility approves, we approve the application, and upon rejection also, we'll reject the application. So all the rejected applications, so once you submit the application, right, so the application ID will be clickable, and you will land on the similar page here with all the details filled. And you will be able to say resubmit the application option here for all the rejected applications.
Thank you, Kaushik. Is there anything else you'd like to add about the application process as today's portal concerned?
No, I think I covered most of the customer journey. Tony. If anyone have any questions, please.
All right, great. I will take back control here, and we'll see if there are any questions that came in. So we did get one more question again from Michael. If there are others out there that do have questions, now is the time to type those into the questions interface so we can try to answer those for you today. The question from Michael is the commercial application the same? Kaushik or Ed, you probably know which one they're talking about. I'm not sure if they mean the application to Connecticut Green Bank or to Enphase, but maybe one of you could answer that.
Yeah, that has to be that question. We're not supporting the commercial portion of this program right now.
Yeah, so from the Green Bank's perspective, if you want to join ESS or Energy Storage Solutions, I should say, you can. It's just toggling, which customers you choose to serve, and there's not much difference in terms of the application for Resi versus C&I. If you want to offer residential incentives, we just ask that you submit a standard copy of your residential sales agreement. Whereas with commercial, they're a little bit more custom, so we don't expect you to have a standard agreement for every customer. But for Resi, we expect you to use the same type of agreement for every customer. And then for individual projects in the program, it's really it just comes down to which selection you make in the incentive application on our website.
Well, that's the last question that was typed in. Let's go ahead and talk about training opportunities and next steps, and give other attendees the opportunity to type their questions in if they do have some. So some of you on the webinar today might not have installed an Enphase system before. If you've installed Enphase Solar, no certification course is required. However, if you are installing an Enphase battery, any of the models that we offer, you do have to actually get Enphase certified through Enphase University. It's a completely free program. We offer certification programs in installation and design, and some of those are gating, meaning you must take the course in order to be able to use the Enphase app to commission a system. And we also offer Enphase storage sales training as well for your sales teams. Focuses on the key features and benefits of the Enphase system, the batteries, and so forth. We also do offer hands-on training as well in select locations around the country. We have regional training centers usually located at prominent distributors in the region. So if you would like hands-on training, please go to Enphase University, and you can select hands-on installation training to see what dates and locations are available that might be convenient for you to attend. And on this, again, this is a PDF which you can download through the handout section of GoToWebinar, and we have these links here, these additional next steps. So there, the link at the top is a link to more information about the Enphase certification program and Enphase University. We also have a LinkedIn group for grid services, and a link to the Enphase website, or web page rather, for grid services. And also the installer grid intake portal, which is where you can submit the application. And if you do have other questions, please send those to the email here at the bottom of the screen, gridservices@enphase.com, and we'll get back to you quickly with an answer. All right, so another couple of questions did come in, so let's take a look at these. So question from Gail. I saw mention of IQ Battery 3. Is the IQ Battery 10 system the only size which qualifies for the programs? Steve,
Yeah,
would you like to take that one?
Yes, absolutely. So the IQ Battery 3 does qualify, and the IQ Battery 10. I was just giving IQ Battery 10 as an example for some of the incentives that you could earn, but it's very similar with the IQ Battery 3. It would just basically be a third of the incentive that you saw there. And then, of course, if you have two IQ Battery 10s, you double the annual incentives and upfront incentives that I showed.
Steve, is there a certain IQ battery capacity at which point there are no additional incentives?
There isn't a max of
as in, like,
7,000.
the maximum power is reached or something like that? Maybe you could clarify that.
Well, $7,500 is the maximum amount of incentive that you could receive for any one customer. So it would be, I don't know what that is, 3 or 4 IQ Battery 10s, probably 4. I don't know. I'd have to look at do the math, but you can't get more than $7,500 up front. Yeah, but you could continue to get performance incentive. There's no maximum on the performance, just on the upfront incentive.
Okay, and that maximum amount is the same for regular customers as well as the low income categories?
I believe so. Ed, could you confirm that 7,500 would be the max, whether you're a standard customer or low income or underserved?
That is currently the case. We are looking into ways of expanding that cap for certain qualified customers.
All right, next question is from Jessica. Ed's sample schedule that included the storm event showed an active dispatch event the day before the storm. I thought there was a 24-hour period prior to a storm that would have no dispatch. Ed, could you clarify?
Actually, that is a good question, and I will clarify that with our utility partners and make sure that that's in our program documentation. So that my chart may not have been accurate, but I'll have to circle back on an answer for that.
All right, thanks, Ed. Question from Nikki. In regards to Enphase battery training, the last time one of my technicians called for assistance in commissioning the battery, he was told that there needs to be another engineer with battery certifications, but it's fully certified, so I'm not sure who else would need to be since he's the one calling. Nikki, what I think you're referring to is design training. So there are two different certifications that are required for a company to be authorized. And those certifications can be held by different people or by the same person. And those certifications are the Enphase Storage Installation Certification, as well as the Enphase Storage Design Certification. If you would like me to take a look at your specific account, please just email me by responding to the confirmation email for this webinar. And I can look up your Enlighten ID and look up your company and see what the issue is. Question from Jessica. Can Enphase explain again how/why the dispatch is set to 1.6 kilowatts for an IQ10?
Yeah, this is a little confusing, but right now the way the program is set up with our DERMS partner Energy Hub, they can only take one committed dispatch amount. So that right now is set for, when Kashik showed you in the grid intake portal, you can select how many IQ Battery 10s and IQ Battery 3s, and then it automatically calculates the committed power. And it's going to be, something like 1.61 kilowatts for an IQ Battery 10. And that is based on basically 80% of the energy, usable energy of the battery, 80% of it, because you're going to set this reserve SOC at 20% for each event, and then divide that by 5 hours, because that's the passive event length. And that's where you get the 1.61 kilowatts for an IQ Battery 10. But if it was an active event, it's not going to be 5 hours. It could be 1 to 3 hours. And so you could discharge quite a bit more before you reach that 20% reserve SOC. The problem is right now, the way the program is set up with Energy Hub, they can only take one committed dispatch amount for every event. We're hoping that in the very near future, and hopefully by the end of this year, we will be able to have different committed dispatch amounts, committed power amounts for different events. So for active events, we could set it at basically 8 kilowatt hours divided by 3 hours, and rather than 8 kilowatt hours divided by 5 hours for active events. So hopefully that makes sense. That's an additional functionality that we have, but we have to integrate that with our DERMS partner, and that's ongoing. So I can't give you an exact date, but we're hoping, relatively soon, probably by the end of the year, if not sooner. But as soon as we are able to do that, we'll communicate that to installers so they can start to sell that as a feature. I know it's frustrating that we can't say that today performance incentive will be 50% higher than what I showed, but we are pretty optimistic that that will be the case relatively soon.
Right, thanks, Steve. I don't see any additional questions coming in. So again, for those of you out there who have questions that come up after we've concluded, please send those to the email address that you see on the screen here, gridservices@enphase.com, and we'll make sure to get back to you with a response. So with that, we'll conclude the webinar today. Thank you very much for joining us. We appreciate you taking time out of your day to learn more about this program and Enphase Grid Services in general. And we look forward to working with you on your projects and these incentive programs going forward. Have a great day.
Thanks, everyone.